Hello and welcome to the Friday Market Wrap-Up presented by the Gokhstein News Network. I'm your host, Landy. Today is Friday, July 25th, 2025. We're going to take a look at Bitcoin. We might, if we have some time, take a look at Ethereum, Solana, maybe some Bitcoin dominance. Might just hop around. We'll see what we can get to here. But for Bitcoin right now, we did get the move outside of the bottom of the range, one that I was talking about, that we could see a swing through the bottom side of the support structure here locally for Bitcoin. And as long as it's closing back above 115.7, things are looking good and still looking bullish, obviously above the basis band as well, which is the 20 simple moving average over here. So let's zoom in real quick. But before doing so, I did want to point out that we are moving from expansion back into contraction. So this is telling me that the next move is getting loaded up. And it might take a little bit, but we have some really clear criteria that is now on the board to start looking for either a move to the top side and potential expansion above the all-time high, and a move to the downside, obviously below the basis and outside of the bottom of the range here. And let's get right to it and discuss some of the criteria that I'm looking for. So here on the daily, Bitcoin did swing down to 114,750, so just below that $115,000, and bounced right back up, closing near the top side of the support here, right around that 117,700 to 118. Now we did get the close in yesterday's candle coming in at 117,633, and so far, so good for the bulls. This was a nice bullish defense of the lows here. Nice swing down for some liquidity, but a nice close back in, more importantly. But that does mean that if Bitcoin does find this area as resistance and begins to drop the bottom side there at 115,700, look for that low to be the next big target to get ran again, possibly down to that lower, that would be the lower first standard deviation there, right around 113 to 113 and a half or so. Anywhere below there, we're looking for a retest of the big weekly higher high, the previous weekly higher high here at 112 to 109 as a general area of interest. And yes, there is daily areas of interest along the way. You can see here that the lower first standard deviation is coming right in line with this closing higher high structure as it related to this downtrend, right around that 110.5, 110,600. You see, we also have the swing highs that were coming in here. We kind of had a little bit of a short-term double top on the daily for swing highs before the consolidation, and then the move up to new highs. So that's going to be the main area to pay attention to the downside. If we do start seeing price close below 115,700, first look right to that swing low, 115, 114, 750, down to that lower first is an actual possibility. Again, as long as Bitcoin is, it can wick fish for a while or hunt for liquidity for a little while, but as long as it's closing back above 115,700, it remains bullish. Now, if it does start to drop that area, that's when I'm looking for a retest. If you start seeing the 109 weekly closing high, that's the last weekly closing higher high. And that's where we start looking to the next consolidation down here before price made a new all-time high, right around that 108 to 107. And realistically, even if we saw dailies drop on the bottom side, doesn't do too much unless we start seeing the last weekly higher low structure start to drop, which of course was a daily area of interest on a lower low in this case, at 101 to that 98,225 before we had a little bit of a higher high close, lower high swing to higher low, trend break after the reversal setup here, consolidation, and then boom, up. So to the upside, what do we need to see? In the lower term timeframes, and especially on dailies, we want to see Bitcoin closing back above that 117,800 to 118 area. Give it a chance to test up to 120. Anywhere above there, there is around 120 and a half, but realistically above 120 and the upper first standard deviation, I'd be looking right to this swing lower high up here at $121,000. If we do start to see even lower term timeframes close above there, then I would look at this as an opportunity for the bulls to come up and test the upper second standard deviation, coming in at $123,000 right at the high there. I still would give it room, 123 to 125. Of course, if it starts to trade above 125, anywhere above there, we're looking towards that, the band stretching back out towards a major area of interest that I've talked about quite a bit at 128 to 130 by that upper third standard deviation. So if Bitcoin did start to break back to the upside, you'd see the bands flatten out. You'd see them kind of stretch out as well. If it starts to trade above the upper second, you'll see the upper third start to trade back towards or swing back towards that 128 to 130 area. Now, a little bit more investigation reveals that, we don't have anything too crazy going on with RSI. Yes, I know there was higher reads on RSI from prior trends, but in this current trend and a little bit of a swing downtrend and closing downtrend that we have going on here for the daily, there's not anything too crazy. There's no big bearish divergence from this most recent uptrend. So this still reads as consolidation, and the bulls still have the edge here unless we see 115,700 dropped on a close. Then I do think we start trading back towards this low and possibly lower. That's still in correction territory, though. That's not that big of a deal. When looking at the stochastic momentum indicator, we do see that a regular stoch is falling out of the bullish control zone. We have a pivot of, guess what, 120. And in fact, it's 120, 100, 120. It doesn't really matter. Trade above 120. I'm looking to that 121 by the top side of the green zone. That would also put price back above the upper first standard deviation. And if it does put in any kind of structural, low here, there is no new in trend for this new little downtrend here, bullish divergence. You would see continuation drives from prior structures, just like, first drives off this high and the highs that are in this zone being kind of historical or hidden. We would see some hidden bull divs populate, but nothing too crazy going on there. If we now go up to the weekly, here's what we need to watch over the weekend. On Sunday, bulls would prefer to see closes back above 115,700. Why? Because any closes below it would set this not as just a swing high over here at 123, but would also set the closing high at 123 with the closing higher high in the weekly being that 119 area. That would paint the picture of a possible or more probable test down towards, or at least more wick fishing towards the 112 to 109 area by this prior higher high close and swing at 112 to 109. And on the daily, again, could it wick fish down there if it was to get there? Sure. But realistically on the weekly with this kind of a setup, if it's above the upper first, still looks really good, really, really good. We have the basis now is likely going to close, especially if Bitcoin closes above around 112,500. What we'll see is the basis will continue to swoop up above the last higher low. And we do want to see it above the close. That would look really good for the bulls here in terms of setup for possible continuation. To the upside, we see that upper second standard deviation is still hanging around that 125 area. This will update, likely going to be around 126 to 128 on its next close. Again, for the last big monthly area of interest, we'll just cover that again real quick here. We've got the last monthly higher high on a close and a swing to the last monthly higher low on a close and a swing. So we have that 109,360. With the close there that was coming in right at around 102.5 to the 74,420.69 down here on the low to the close open right there at around 82.5. When pulling that with fibs, with pulling a fib retracement with extensions, you can see the 1414 is right there at 128 to 130. Again, references on the weekly. And, we saw that, and we could potentially see the upper second. The upper second was around that when we saw the candle turning green earlier this week. But more likely than not, that's going to move up there anyway, right around that 128 to 130, maybe a little bit on the lower end if things are kind of closing more towards the upper first. But we are looking at the stretching out of the bands and getting some more expansion to the upside here as we see the lower set of bands starting to curl up between the lower first, second, and third here. For the weekly, we probably will see, well, let's see what the pivot is here. We probably will see Stoke turn down. Actually, okay, so it's not, it's within shot for local price action at 115. So if we do see the weekly close below 115, we will get a momentum shift. But it's really about close over close momentum. That would be an initial shift in momentum from a stochastic momentum indicator. This is a regular Stoke, not a Stoke RSI. Stoke RSI measures the velocity of RSI, which we've already looked at. And this is close over close price momentum. And in this case, it is a lagging indicator, but you're taking the confluences between, trend, support, and resistance, volatility, which creates momentum. So we do see that, there is the possibility for it to turn. It's realistically, if the bulls want to fend off this area on a close, that's kind of what they need to do and start pushing higher over the weekend. And that's going to be closes above 115,700 as it starts to get really close to the momentum pivot anywhere below there. I do want to remind you that 128 to 130 above there, if we start to see weeklies especially close above there, we can start raising the targets up to this 1.618 from that last higher high to higher low on the monthly at $138,000 to $140,000, even potentially bringing the 150K up there by 148 to 150 into play. But we do have a confluent area right overhead between local fib extension and a historical fib extension from the prior cycle at $69,000 to the 15.5 low. Let's go ahead and actually straighten this out a bit. And you can see that is also going to be a 1414 at $128,000 to $130,000. So you can also see that Bitcoin is kind of just running the upper second in the context of a compression. And it's a bullish compression in this case. So if it does start to break above by the end of the month, about 120, then we are looking at expansion to the upside and possibly more aggressive expansion to the upside as we continue on. That's going to be Bitcoin for today. Watch 115,700 on a close. You start seeing it trade below there over the weekend. Look for the most recent low to get ran, possibly lower if it starts closing below there. Look for 115,700 specifically as we come into the Sunday weekly close. If we do see it close below there, that will set the high on a swing and a close, setting that high at 123. And of course, the closing high now would be at, if it did do that, that would be right at around 119. So that's my take on Bitcoin for today. Watch it closely, know the levels, know the conditions. That's the big thing. And even if you want to go back to some of the, like the Wednesday check-in or the Macro Monday video from earlier this week to kind of put together that picture for you, I suggest that you do so because this is kind of where the rubber hits the road. Let's go ahead and take a look at Bitcoin dominance. Bitcoin dominance did get a nice little bounce. It is headed back down. Looks like a lower high. Yep, it is a lower high. So we do have, a nice bounce here, but immediately back into lower high territory, giving us a target potentially if it does want to continue past the most recent low at around 60.5% even. Then we'd be looking to 60%, possibly a swing down below 60% into the 59% region. But I'd be aware of this higher lowing its way and then taking out the 62.5%. That's the one thing I'd be aware of. And why would I be aware of that? Because it's all going to be conditional on what alts do here, right? So if Ethereum does fall out of this zone, which actually looks all right on the daily here, holding above the upper first, if it can trade back above around 3750, then it has a chance to run its high at, the 3850, 3900 and start working its way towards this massive overhead area of interest, and maybe even try to work its way towards 4K, which is up here where it's been rejected quite often in recent history since March of last year when it got up here. So, and you can see that the upper second is painting that picture. And as long as it's closing above the upper first, which is going to continue to move up, close over close, It does mean that the bulls want to, kind of shit or get off the pot here and move to the highs here and start working their way towards the 3,900, 3,930 overhead resistance, possibly coming up to 4K and maybe even above there at 4,100. Um, and, things look fine. I mean, above 37.75, we would be in higher low territory on a close. Right now, the swing is set as of the Friday closure, but we don't have the close set until we see closes above 37.75. And that's, if it corrected further, I mean, we did have a nice lower term time frame correction to 3,500, but if it did correct further, put in a lower high or kind of swing and fail, I'd be looking back to some of the key areas over here, kind of on a close where this consolidation is just below 3,500 to the 786 fib retracement, as we are going to see the basis start to work its way towards that, right around that, 3,300 to 3,400 area. If it breaks down aggressively from there, that's where I'd look back to the big zone down here in longer term. Might even get front run in the 3K region before hitting this, especially if we see the upper first start to trade above here, if price action's hanging about up here. So the lower first, rather, starting to get above that zone, that would look really good for the bulls here. And then maybe that could be confluent with Bitcoin dominance, putting in a lower high and trying to test that lower low that it just set. And for the daily, it's looking more corrective than not, but it still has, there's no in-trend bearish divergence right now for this current trend. Yes, there is. And in fact, it even avoided it for some of the more recent trends. So it looks pretty good. I mean, it's when you start getting over here where, there's long-term historical, but it doesn't matter. It's all about in-trend. And right now there's nothing. So even if it corrects further from here, gets into a bullish flag or something, it's the outlook is still bullish on it to continue testing higher, but maybe a little bit of a break in some consolidation. $3,063 will keep momentum pointed to the upside on the weekly. Let's go ahead and check on Solana real quick. Solana, I would like to see Solana, the Solana bros and bulls. If you want this to break on a close, you don't want to swing fail, to be quite honest. And I think there's going to be more than one chance at this, but you need to see close above 187.73, and price is kind of right there. I mean, preferably there's a daily level here at about 190 that you'd like to see it get above, and the upper second just above there at 191, 192 to really give price the opportunity to head up to 210. Otherwise, we're looking for a correction and consolidation. Try again later. Now, we did have a nice correction. It did lose the upper first, but it's holding the support. If it does drop it, you want to see swings coming in right around this order block candle by the basis, right around the 170 to 173 area. If it starts to break down, that's a retest of, the mid 160s to 160 even. If it starts to break down from there, we're looking down to, the 150, 155 area down here. Lower second might just slide in there and provide some reversal opportunity support there from a volatility point of view. But at the end of the day, it's about the trend. It's about support and resistance. And the volatility is kind of just going to line up in most cases with the areas of interest. Looks good, but bulls need to set that higher high in a close. You don't want to see just a higher high swing like what we're seeing here. We want to see the close come in. But even if it did correct, right back to 150, it's fine. Anywhere below there, things get a little dangerous and a little dicey, and threatening that last higher low, because that higher low trend reversal setup did result in a higher high swing, which is going to be viewed as positive, but you need to see the close come in. That's what is going to be more positive than not, because then you actually have that trend breaking close. And that's going to be very important for the Solana bulls over there. And let's check on Sui really quick. Sui's in the same position. It just swung the high, nice trend reversal setup. We need to see closes above, what is that, 430, I think it is, right? Yeah, it's basically 430. Yeah, it's right there at 430. You need to see closes above there on the weekly. That would be your trend reversal setup to trend reversal confirmation on a close. Need to see that for the bulls there. But again, this was, big expansion up, big correction down to supports. And then, it's got to find its footing, right? Lower high, higher low, higher high. That's what you want to see. Same goes for, and you can see the bands have to twist around too to kind of give that room to go run the all-time high area and get that continuation. And that's, so the setup is still bullish. It's bullish until it's not. And Ethereum's already kind of completing it's already completed its trend reversal confirmation with the highs last week being set. It just needs some recovery, and the bands needs to turn things around. I'd like to see a consolidation on the daily that turns into maybe even a little bit of a correction on the weekly, and then start to get that compression back to re-expansion and really start tagging these highs and carving out those highs, flipping them back into support instead of resistance. So it is positive that you see the lower high being held. And so far, there's no closing high that could be had this week. So we'll come back and evaluate next week. And that's what I got for you this Friday for the wrap up. I appreciate you. Please like and share these, and let me know what you think. And if you enjoy me covering some of the alts, I mainly stick to Bitcoin because where Bitcoin goes in general, the rest of the market goes. And if it corrects, we're probably seeing the US dollar pairs correct in alts and memes and so on and so forth. But if they're not correcting as hard, obviously, then Bitcoin dominance will continue to go down. And that's when we can start to really evaluate if alt season is going to become if this mini alt season will start to look like it's turning into a full blown alt season. I honestly think we're still on track for Q4 for some of that stuff, if it's going to happen. And we're just going to be tracking it throughout the summer. Coming into like September, October timeframe to really start looking to see if it's turning around into a full-blown alt season. We got to give some of these alts some time to kind of really set in the reversal structures and for many of them to get their trend breaks and confirmations like Ethereum did. Ethereum's leading the alts right now. So keep a close eye on it. I don't care what your favorite alt is. It is the one leading. It's got the highest market cap. It's going to be able to take the biggest bite out of Bitcoin dominance. And of course, look to Bitcoin to hold up this area at 115,700 on a low, on a close specifically. And you want to see it trading back above 121 to start tagging the all-time high and possibly higher. Be aware that if it does, expansion into compression, if it does tag the high and even go higher to like 125, that doesn't mean that it's ready to actually get its next move. It could just be chopping around and forming a range again, as this is moving from expansion into compression. And on the other side of that, if we start seeing it break out above 123 on closes, then we can look up to that 128 to 130 and take it day by day. You have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe and have a great weekend. Enjoy yourselves. Touch some grass. Just keep an eye on the charts and have a good one. I'll talk to you on Monday. Landy out. Take care.